A massive hand shoved hard into an old man's chest. He didn't move. The hand pulled back and curled into a fist. Came forward fast, aimed straight at his jaw. And then it stopped. Not blocked. Stopped. The old man had 2 fingers pressed against the inside of the big man's wrist, and the whole arm locked up, trembling, going nowhere. 40 people stood frozen around them. Stunt performers, camera crew, men who broke bones for a living, and not one of them made a sound. The big man's name was Cole Brennan, and for 10 years he had been the most feared body on any film set in the business. He had just told the smaller man that his fighting was useless. He said it loud so everyone could hear. What happened in the next 90 seconds, his own crew never forgot. Stay with me on this one. Let me take you back a few hours to how all of this started. The place was a soundstage. One of those huge metal warehouses out past the edge of the city, the kind they rent to film crews when a movie needs a lot of room and no neighbors to bother. Inside, they were shooting an action picture. Fight scenes. Lots of them. And on a set like that, the most important man in the room isn't the director, and it isn't the star. It's the fight coordinator. He's the one who designs every punch, every throw, every fall. He's the one who keeps people from getting killed doing dangerous things for the camera. On this set, that man was Cole Brennan. Now, Cole was big. I told you that already. 6'5", maybe a little more. Built like a door. He'd done stunts for 20 years, and for the last 10 he'd run his own crew, and that crew did what he said when he said it, no questions. Part of that was respect. He was good at the job, nobody denied it. But a bigger part of it was fear. Because Cole liked people to be a little afraid of him. He thought fear was the same thing as respect. A lot of men make that mistake. He had a way of running the room. He'd stand in the middle of the floor with his arms crossed and watch the young guys run a fight beat, and when somebody got it slightly wrong, he wouldn't pull them aside quietly. No, he'd call it out, loud, in front of everybody. He liked the audience. He liked the silence after. It told him he was still the biggest thing in the room. And for 10 years, on every set he walked onto, he was. But not on this one. Because a few days before, the director had done something Cole didn't like one bit. The director wanted the fights in this picture to look real. Not movie real. Actually real. So he'd brought in a consultant. An outside man. Somebody who'd really fought a long time ago, and who now spent his time teaching people how the body actually moves when somebody is genuinely trying to hurt it. That man's name was Eli Marsh. And when Eli Marsh walked onto that set for the first time, half the crew didn't even notice him. That's the truth. He was a small man, late 50s, thin, gray at the temples, quiet in the way he moved, the kind of man you'd walk right past in a hardware store and never look at twice. He wore a plain shirt and an old silver wristwatch, and he carried nothing but a thermos of coffee. He didn't announce himself. He found a folding chair off to the side, sat down and watched. There was one thing about that watch, by the way. Nobody on that set knew it yet. But the men who had trained with Eli years ago knew it cold. When Eli Marsh took that watch off, it meant the talking was finished. Remember that. It matters later. Cole hated him on sight. Now here's the thing about a man like Cole. He'd spent his whole life being the biggest body in every room. Size was his whole language. And here was this little gray-haired stranger that the director thought knew something Cole didn't. To Cole, that wasn't a consultant. That was an insult with legs. The director might as well have walked up and said, in front of the whole crew, that Cole wasn't good enough anymore. So Cole did what Cole always did. He decided to put the man in his place. Not all at once. He'd been around long enough to be patient about it. But he started looking for the moment. Watching for the chance to show everybody that this little old man was nothing, and that Cole Brennan was still the only real fighter on that floor. He didn't have to wait long. And when the moment came, believe me, it did not go the way he planned. It happened on the 3rd day. They were shooting a big fight beat. A 2-man thing where one stuntman throws another over his hip and the second man takes a hard fall onto a stack of pads. Simple enough on paper. But Cole wanted it to look brutal. He wanted the fall to land half off the pads onto the bare floor so the camera would catch a real impact. The young stuntman doing the fall was a kid named Danny, 23 years old. Eager. The kind of kid who'd say yes to anything because he was scared of saying no. Eli watched them set it up. And quietly, from his chair, he said, "That landing's wrong. He's gonna come down on his shoulder. Move the pads 6 inches and turn the throw." He didn't say it to embarrass anybody. He said it the way you'd tell a man his headlight was out. Just a fact offered to be helpful. But Cole heard it. And the whole crew heard Cole hear it. Cole turned around slow. "You got something to say about my set?" Eli held up a hand. "No trouble. Just the angle. The boy's going to get hurt." "The boy's fine," Cole said. "The boy does what I tell him. You want to teach a yoga class? There's a studio down the road." A couple of the crew laughed. The nervous kind of laugh. Cole liked that. He turned back, told Danny to run it, and Danny ran it. And Danny came down on his shoulder. You could hear it. That flat, wrong sound. The kid rolled off the pads holding his arm, his face white, breathing in little gasps. 2 guys ran over to him. And for a second nobody said anything, because everybody had heard the old man call it 10 seconds before it happened. That was the part Cole couldn't stand. Not that the kid got hurt, that the old man was right out loud in front of everyone. So Cole did the thing that men like Cole do when they're embarrassed. He went on the attack. He walked straight across the floor right up to Eli's chair and he stood over him. All 6'5" of him looking down at this small-seated man. "You think you know fighting," Cole said. Loud. So it carried. "You sit there in your little chair with your little watch and you think you know something. Let me tell you what I know. I know that whatever you do, all that soft little stuff you teach, it's useless. You understand me? Useless. Out here in the real world, against a real man my size, you wouldn't last 2 seconds." The whole floor had gone quiet now. 40 people. The lighting guys had stopped. Somebody killed the music. Even the 2 men helping Danny had gone still. Everybody was watching. Eli stood up. Slow. He came up to about Cole's chest. He set his thermos down on the chair behind him very carefully, like he didn't want to spill it. "I don't think we need to do this," Eli said. "Quiet. The boy's hurt. Let's get him to a doctor and call it a day." But Cole wasn't listening. Cole heard a small man trying to back out, and to Cole that was blood in the water. He put his hand flat on Eli's chest and he shoved. Hard. A shove that would have put most men on the floor. Eli didn't go to the floor. He rocked back half a step, settled, and stood there, looking up at Cole. Calm as a man waiting for a bus. And that little bit of calm, that was the thing that made Cole crazy. Because a man who's afraid gives you something. He flinches. He puts his hands up. He backs away. Eli gave him nothing. He stood there and looked at him, patient, almost kind, like he felt a little sorry for him. "Please," Eli said. "Don't." Cole grinned. He thought he'd won. To him, "Please don't," was the white flag he'd been waiting for. He turned around to his crew, arms spread wide, playing to the room. "You hear that?" he called out, laughing. "Please don't. That's your expert, fellas. That's the man who's going to teach us all how to fight." And then Eli did exactly what everybody expected him to do. He nodded. Just a small nod, like he agreed it wasn't worth it. He reached down, picked his thermos back up off the chair, and he slid the old silver watch off his wrist and dropped it in his shirt pocket, the way a tired man puts his things away at the end of a long day. "All right," he said soft. "We're done here." And he turned to go. Cole laughed and turned back to his crew. Somebody finally moved to help Danny toward the door. The tension just drained out of the room, all at once, like air out of a balloon. It was over. The old man was leaving. There wasn't going to be any fight after all. That's what everybody thought. And that's when Cole's voice cut across the room. "No," he said. "Not like that." And when everybody turned, he was standing at the prop table, and he had a knife in his hand. Now, the prop table on a fight set has all kinds of weapons. Most of them are rubber. Soft foam blades painted to look like steel. But there were a few real ones too, the ones they used for close-up shots where the camera needed to see real metal catch the light. And the one in Cole's hand was real. You could tell by the way it hung. By the way the light sat on the edge of it. The whole feeling in the room changed in a second. Because up until then, this had been about pride. A big man and a small man, and who was tougher. Ugly, sure, but the kind of ugly that ends with some shouting and everybody goes home. The knife took all of that and turned it into something else. Now it was about whether a man was going to get cut on a Tuesday afternoon. Now it wasn't pride anymore. It was a real blade in a strong man's hand, and a small old man with nothing in his. And it got worse than that, because over by the monitors, the director, a man named Reyes, leaned toward his camera operator and said something low. And the operator turned the camera back toward the floor. And the little red light on the front of it came on. Reyes wasn't stopping it. He was filming it. Maybe he thought he was protecting himself, getting it on record. Maybe some ugly part of him just wanted to see what would happen. Doesn't matter why. What matters is that whatever happened next on that floor wasn't going to live and die in that room anymore. It was going on tape. It was going to follow somebody around for the rest of their life. Cole's or Eli's. Somebody's. So now you had all of it at once. A real knife. A real chance somebody gets hurt. And a camera running, turning a private, stupid moment into something permanent. Something the whole industry might one day see. Cole came off that table slow, the knife low at his side, that grin still on his face. "Come on, old man," he said. "Show me something useless." Eli sighed. The kind of sigh a man makes when he's run out of ways to be polite. He reached up toward his collar, about to take off his watch, and then he stopped because his hand found his pocket and he remembered. The watch was already off. He'd taken it off 10 minutes ago when Cole shoved him, when most of the room thought he was just packing up to leave. He hadn't been packing up. He'd been getting ready. He'd just been hoping he wouldn't have to. Cole lunged. The knife came up fast, straight at Eli's middle, all of that 260 pounds behind it. And Eli wasn't there. I don't know a better way to tell you what happened, because the crew who watched it didn't either. There was no big movement. Eli's body just turned. A small turn. A half step off the line, and Cole's whole charge went sailing past him into empty air. The big man stumbled 3 steps and had to catch himself on the prop table to keep from going down. The knife was still in his hand. But he'd missed a man standing 2 feet in front of him, and 40 people had just watched him do it. A sound went through the crew. Not a cheer. More like a gasp altogether, the sound a room makes when it sees something it can't explain. Let me stop right here for 1 second. If you're still with me, and you want to see how this ends, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what Eli Marsh did in the next 30 seconds is the part nobody on that set ever stopped talking about. Now, Cole turned around, and his face had changed. The grin was gone. He wasn't playing to the crew anymore. He'd felt it now, that little half-second where he swung at a man and hit nothing, and some animal part of his brain had finally understood that something was wrong. That he was out of his depth. And a certain kind of man, when he feels that, doesn't back off. He gets scared, and scared makes him meaner. Cole set his feet, both hands on the knife now, and he came at Eli for real. What happened next took about 6 seconds. I'm going to slow it down so you can see all of it, but understand, on that floor it was almost too fast to follow. Cole drove in with the knife, a real thrust this time, aimed high at the chest. And this time Eli didn't step away. This time he stepped in. Toward it. Toward the knife. Which is the last thing in the world the big man expected, and the last thing his body was ready for. Eli's left hand came up and caught Cole's wrist. The knife wrist. Just behind the joint. 2 fingers and a thumb. That's all. He didn't grab it the way you'd grab a rope. He pressed in one exact spot, and Cole's whole arm locked up. The hand wouldn't close. The knife hung there in fingers that suddenly wouldn't squeeze. Cole pushed with everything he had, all that size, all that strength, and the arm just trembled and went nowhere, like it had been bolted to the air. That was the moment from the very beginning of this story. The fist that came forward and stopped. Now you know how it got there. Then Eli turned. Just turned his hips, the way he'd told Danny to turn hours before, and Cole's own weight, all that charging 260 pounds, had nowhere to go but down and around. The big man went up onto his toes, off balance, helpless, following his own trapped arm because the only other choice was a broken elbow. Eli walked him down, gentle almost, folded him toward the mat the way you'd lay down a ladder. And Cole, who had thrown men around that very floor for 10 years, went down onto his knees on the pads with an old man's 3 fingers on his wrist, and could not do one single thing about it. The knife. Eli just took it. He pressed once more on that spot and Cole's fingers opened on their own, and the knife dropped, and Eli kicked it away across the floor where it spun and stopped against the leg of the prop table. Out of reach. Out of the story. And then he held him there. That was the part nobody forgot. Not the throw. The hold. Because Eli didn't hurt him. That's the thing. He could have. Everybody watching understood, in that moment, that the old man could have broken that arm in 3 places, could have put Cole on the floor with something he'd never walk right from again. He had all of it right there in 3 fingers. And he didn't use it. He just held Cole there, down on his knees, controlled, completely, while the whole crew watched. Long enough for it to sink in. Long enough for every single person in that room to understand exactly what they were looking at. The biggest, loudest, most feared man on that set, down on the pads, held in place by a small gray-haired stranger who wasn't even breathing hard, who had one hand free at his side, who looked, if anything, a little sad about the whole thing. Cole stopped struggling. There was nothing to struggle against. You can't fight a lock you don't understand. The more he pushed, the worse it got, and somewhere in those few seconds the fight just went out of him, all of it, 10 years of it, gone. Eli leaned down, and quiet just for Cole, but in a room so silent that everybody heard it anyway, he said one thing. "It's not useless," he said. "You just never met anybody who could do it." And then he let go. He stepped back and opened his hand and Cole's arm was his own again. And for a second Cole just knelt there on the pads, holding his wrist, not looking at anybody. Not at Eli. Not at his crew. 40 people, and he couldn't lift his eyes to a single one of them. Because every one of them had just watched. And he knew it. And they knew he knew it. Eli straightened up. He took the watch out of his pocket, and he slid it back onto his wrist, and he fastened it, slow, like a man closing a door he'd rather not have had to open. The talking was over. The watch was back on. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. The only sound in that whole huge metal building was Cole Brennan breathing, down on his knees, in front of every man who had ever been afraid of him. Here's what Eli Marsh did next. And this is the part that tells you who he really was. He didn't celebrate. He didn't say one more word to Cole. He didn't even look at him again. He turned around and walked over to where Danny was sitting against the wall, still holding his hurt shoulder. The scared 23-year-old kid who'd come down wrong an hour ago because a big man told him to. Eli crouched down next to him. He looked at the shoulder. "It's not broken," he said. "It's wrenched. You'll be sore a couple weeks. You'll be fine." And then, soft so just the kid could hear it. "It wasn't your fault. You did it the way you were told. That's on him, not you." And then he did something I think is the whole point of this story. He stood Danny up, careful, and walked him back over to the pads. The same pads. And he showed him, slow, with the kid's good arm, no weight, no danger. He showed Danny how the throw was supposed to go, where the pads should sit, how to turn so you land flat and roll so the floor never gets a clean shot at you. He took the exact thing that had hurt the boy and turned it into the thing that would keep him safe the next 1,000 times he did it. That's what a real teacher does. He doesn't win and walk away. He leaves you better than he found you. The crew started to gather around. Not around Cole. Around Eli. Watching him show the kid the fall. asking quiet questions, learning. And for the first time on that whole shoot, the room felt easy. The fear was just gone. You didn't realize how heavy it had been until it lifted. Cole, meanwhile, had gotten up off the pads and gone to sit by himself on an equipment case at the far edge of the floor. Alone. Nobody went over to him. Not out of cruelty. There just wasn't anything to say. Everybody had seen the same thing, and there was no version of it where Cole came out the way he used to be. He sat there with his elbows on his knees and stared at the floor, and you got the feeling he was running it back in his head, over and over, the way a man does when something he believed his whole life just turned out to be wrong. There was still the matter of the camera. Before Eli left, he walked over to the monitors to Reyes, the director who had filmed the whole thing. And the crew got quiet again because they figured this was it. This was where the old man made sure the world saw it. A clip like that, in those days passed hand to hand on tape, it would have followed Cole Brennan into every audition room and onto every set for the rest of his career. It would have finished him. And Eli had every right. Cole had pulled a real knife on an unarmed man in front of 40 witnesses. Nobody would have blamed Eli for wanting the proof. Eli looked at the monitor. Then he looked across the floor at Cole, sitting alone on that case, staring at nothing. "Delete it," Eli said. Reyes blinked. "You sure? That's yours if you want it. He came at you with steel. I know what he did." Eli's voice was tired now. "And he's going to live with it a long time. He doesn't need the whole world living with it too." He nodded at the screen. "Delete it." The man learned the lesson. That's what it was for. And Reyes deleted it. The crew watched him do it. And whatever was left of the wall between Cole and the people who used to fear him, that quiet act took a piece of it down too, because every one of them understood that the old man had just handed Cole back his whole future, free, after Cole had tried to put a knife in him. Then Eli Marsh picked up his thermos. He found his folding chair and put it back where it belonged, leaning against the wall. And he walked out of that soundstage the same way he'd walked in 3 days before. Small, quiet, a man you'd pass in a hardware store and never look at twice. Half the crew didn't notice him go, but every one of them remembered him. For years. Long after that movie came and went, the people who'd been on that floor still told the story. About the day the biggest man any of them ever knew called out a little gray stranger. Said his fighting was useless. Said it loud so everyone could hear. And about the 30 seconds that followed, when they all learned the same thing at once. It was never about size. It was never about the loudest voice or the biggest body in the room. The most dangerous man Cole Brennan ever met didn't raise his voice once. He took off a watch. He asked twice to be left alone. And when he finally moved, it was the size of a quiet half-step, and it ended everything. That's the lesson Cole never forgot. The hand that came at that old man, the big fist that everybody was so afraid of, in the end it just hung there in the air. Stopped. Going nowhere. Held in place by 3 fingers and 40 years of knowing exactly what he was doing. And the man those 3 fingers belonged to never even broke a sweat.